did a little rules episode a couple of weeks ago talking about alternating activation in Age of Fantasy Skirmish. And a lot of people came into the comments to say, this is so much better than an IGOUGO system. I really don't like IGO whole side activations. I like alternating where we each take turns because I don't like this kind of No. But everybody followed that up, not with a criticism of activation by side. They generally, I go look at the comments, I'm probably missing one or two, but most of the people that said, oh, I really like alternating activation, immediately followed it up with, I don't like sitting around for 30 minutes waiting for my turn. And I get it. Who wants to sit there waiting around while everybody else does their stuff and 20 minutes later, finally you get a chance to make a decision? That's not enjoyable. But the issue is not whole side activation. The issue is simply one of timing. There are quite a few games where one team acts and activates all of their units, all the units that they can, and then the other one gets to do the same. And I'm kind of cheating a little bit here because I've got three that are basically the same game. But it's not like there aren't other games where the whole side goes first and then another side gets to go first. And we have had a really good time playing these games here on the channel. The difference is that you can do a whole side activation that still engages both sides of the table. Now, there are a lot of ways to do that. Anthems of War, for example. In Anthems of War, for example, you receive generally one or more orders for every figure in your force, but while you're performing your actions, your opponent can do his reactions. I don't consider this to be alternating activations because reactions are limited to those actions taken in response to the opposing player. We have broken up the turn order, and this kind of splits the difference between a whole team, what we normally call IGOUGO, but some of the pencil likes get really wrapped around the axle, really bound up about, well, it's always IGOUGO because you do yours and I do mine, even on alternating activation. Look, we know IGOUGO just is referencing the whole team activation, typical of a game like this bad boy right here. So I'm just going to use IGOUGO and just let it go, guys. It's just a word with a definition. It's fine. Whole team activation, but you don't have to sit around for 20 minutes. It's fine. It's great. Reactions are delightful. Whole team activation, but the game plays so quickly you don't even notice. And when your opponent does something like shoots at you, everything is opposed. So while your opponent is doing his activations, you have to pay attention because you are, in this case, flipping over cards. Not so in this case. This is just a straight IGOUGO, but you've only got 6 units on the table maximum at any given time. It only takes 5-10 minutes to complete your turn. Play flips over to your opponent, and he's just rolling one quick dice. Whole team activations are not something to be afraid of, and I don't think people genuinely dislike these. Night Watch. Bit of a cheat because this is a solo game, of course. You can play it as a co-op. But either way, even if you're playing it as a co-op, you've only got 4 figures on the table, each of which has 4 activations that it can make. You're doing 12 things in any given turn. Some of those things are so fast. I move, and then I roll, and then I roll. But you're rolling 12 dice before your opponent gets to go. So this is another instance where I think whole team activation works. You don't have to sit around for 20 minutes. And then when it's the whole, of course, like I said, it's a bit of cheating because when it's the AI, when it's the algorithm directing, when you're following the little recipe for how the bad guys activate, you're engaged the whole time. So you got me. Solo wargaming is a bit of a cheat. And this brings us to Xenos Rampant and generally the rest of the Rampant family. These games, not you, Gaslands, get out of here. These games have the potential to be my whole side goes, then your whole side goes, but it introduces the variable that not every unit gets to activate every turn. There's a very good chance you're only going to have one or maybe not even any units activate, depending on how bad your rolls are and your special abilities. But here's where things get interesting. Even if your opponent has to go for all of his units, generally in a 28-4 army point game, he'll have 3 to 7 units, depending on whether he's got a lot of elites or a mob army. But when he plays through those, he can generally get through them in 15 to 20 minutes. And after every single unit that he moves, there is at least the potential that you are going to get to go next, that you're going to get to activate your figures next. I've played a number of these games where certain units didn't budge. They never activated. They kept failing and failing and failing, and that's okay. And that is very similar to this game here, where through smart play, your entire team can go. However, so this is an IGOUGO system. However, because the safe play, and for those of you that are not familiar with the Song of series, you can take up to 3, you can attempt 3 activations with each figure. If you fail 2 of them, then your turn is over, meaning every single unit you have on the table can take 1 activation, and you have cut the amount of activity down by 66, down to 1/3 of the possible. Cut it by 66%, I guess you could say. Again, this also, like the Rampant family, has that potential for failure at any time. And it has a couple of governors, and I use that in the automotive sense, that, well, is it a governor if it speeds things up? It's the opposite of a governor, isn't it? It slows down one side's ability to do everything that it wants to in order to flip the script and to keep the game flowing so that you are not stuck waiting for your opponent to do 3 activations for all of his figures, which would take you back to a true IGOUGO system. Again, this is a kind of IGOUGO, but you're not stuck sitting for 20, 30 minutes checking your phone. Before you actually have a decision to make. In a similar vein, games that use a draw from a dice pool to activate could conceivably be an IGOUGO. As the number of dice increases, the likelihood of that decreases, but there is, depending on the vagaries and whims of fate, a chance that you could sit and have to wait for your opponent to run through 4 or maybe even 5 activations before you get your turn. The fact that you have to sit and wait is counterbalanced by the fact that after every unit moved, there's at least the potential for you. Hey, pay attention, dummy. One of us has to draw a die out of the bag. Just the mere potential that you can act is enough to keep you engaged, even if that potential doesn't reach reality. And of course, I've already shown a particular cover often enough, which is, oddly enough, and I don't have a copy of this game, so let me just move these out of the way. I don't have a copy of this game. This is an alternating activation system. But the fact that you alternate between so many different players at the same time kills the interest for you. You get to go, and then everybody else gets to take their turn before it cycles back around to you, or until you roll for that new initiative order. Interestingly enough, if you don't like having to wait 20 minutes. And this is the mamma jamma right here, guys. This is an alternating activation where you still have to wait for 30 minutes because it's not the activation system that's at fault. It's everything else that surrounds it. There is a version of this game that uses IGOUGO, 1 initiative roll, and yet you don't have to sit around for 20 minutes. Although this game is it's wonderfully complex. And although it has so many different if-then conditional statements that may or may not come up, and it can take a little while to resolve, you are resolving it together, the results of the melee together, and so you are fully invested and fully engaged. Even though this is an IGOUGO system, the activation itself is not the issue. It's how it's used. One last little thought before we move on. This is a rather interesting game that, again, depending on the card draw, could conceivably result in an IGOUGO game. probably unlikely given the statistics and the odds of dealing out 5 cards to each player. However, again, I will point out that as an alternating activation system, the little bites of activation are short enough, and calling down the cards, if you're playing, it keeps you engaged in the same way that the activation system for Xenos Rampant, although this is more of an IGOUGO system, the card-driven keeps you engaged in those little bite-sized chunks. There is a potential when the kings are called, I need to know what's going on. There is a potential when the queens are called, I need to know what's going on. Even if you are dealt a hand of cards and none of them are higher than a 6, so you got to wait. In particular, now this is a great game for multiplayer. You get 6 guys around the table, 30 cards, you may have to wait for 25 actions. But of course, spoiler alert, one of the other things to be aware of is that if you're involved in a game where you have decisions to make during the opponent's activation, all this kind of goes out the window, doesn't it? Because it's not about the activation. It's about how it's used. But to bring it back to the cards, if I don't have a card lower than 6, I'm going to have to wait for half of the deck to go through. And if I'm at a table with 5 other players, I may have to wait for 10, 15, 16 activations. That could be 20 minutes. Now that is much like this game. Oh, I got them all. Here we go. Much like this one. Again, it is softened somewhat by the knowledge that there are only so many activations in the bag or in the deck, if you will. And if I have to wait for my opponent to go 4 or 5 activations now, I'm going to make it up on the back end. I'm still going to get my 4 or 5 activations, assuming my units don't die, which in my case is a pretty big assumption. But even that is one of those cases where I know my turn is coming. So even if I have to sit on those rare cases for 20 minutes while I wait for him to do his stuff, I'm willing to do that because I know my turn is coming, and I know how rare that is. And again, as I said, the potential really outweighs that. Kind of a shorter episode today. I just wanted to run through some of those activation systems and remind you guys, it's not about any individual mechanic. You really have to look at the whole package. You really have to look at how that mechanic is implemented and how it integrates to form a seamless whole with the rest of the game. So let's just understand that it ain't the mechanics that we don't like. It's sitting around that we don't like. But this all goes out the window for me as a solo wargamer, because whenever it's IGOUGO, it's really IGO. So take that, people with actual friends. I got friends. I got you guys. Till next time, I'm praying for you.